So in April and May of this year, something huge happened that barely anyone noticed, and yet I think is having seismic implications already. You see, the United States Army sent around 3,500 soldiers to a training exercise in Germany. With them, they brought armoured vehicles, helicopters, drones, electronic warfare systems, the lot, the best equipment from the most powerful military that the world could field. And on the other side, not who you would expect, Ukrainian drone operators from the 412th Regiment of Unmanned Systems Forces, a unit that has been forged in 4.5 years of the most intense warfare, the most intense drone warfare in human history. And then came the exercise itself, and the result wasn't even close. The Ukrainian operators eliminated the entire US armored brigade, the American vehicles being destroyed so quickly that they had to be respawned. Indeed, something like out of Call of Duty, essentially sent back into the exercise as new units, just to keep that training exercise going. And then this is what made it even worse. The Ukrainians actually switched sides midway through that exercise because they were winning too fast, and helped the American side to use their own drone technology offensively instead. The Americans improved, but the lesson had been delivered. NATO's top military leader described it as simply, "The change is remarkable." But of course, he wanted to, as many probably wanted to, say something far more stronger, far more concerning. Because what happened in Germany in the spring is not just a training story. It is the most important story about the future of not just Ukrainian or American, but all of Europe's security that is not being told. More crucially, not being told correctly. Let's get into it.
This is the Global Gambit.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the channel where we are returning to the Russo-Ukrainian war, but an angle that I think has been very underreported despite being huge for its potential implications, and certainly something that I was a little bit privy to, in that I had the opportunity to potentially attend a NATO exercise, but then due to one circumstance or another, it didn't happen. But the information that I was privy to, not able really to break down into until this new information came to light. But before getting into it, what do you think? Has NATO been too slow to learn from Ukraine? Is it still being too slow? What should the alliance be doing to adapt faster, and where can Ukraine support in that? Let me know in the comments below. Now, let's get into the specifics of what happened in Germany, because of course details matter, which you won't find elsewhere on YouTube at a lot of surface level, so subscribe if you want the proper nuances. This was known as Combined Resolve. It's a semi-annual NATO exercise focused on large-scale ground combat. In April and May of this year, 3,500 US personnel from the 3rd Armoured Brigade Combat Team, the 1st Cavalry Division, rotated through. And their task was quite simple: attack a position defended by the exercise's opposition force, but reinforced by Ukrainian troops from places like what's known as the Nemesis Regiment or Ukraine's 412th Unmanned Systems Forces. Now, the American troops sent heavy armoured vehicles into battle. The armour threw up dust, but the Ukrainian reconnaissance drones spotted them immediately. Those drones were then followed by drones that drop explosives and FPV drones, or first-person drones, the kind that smash directly into targets and have been a favourite of the Kremlin. The American vehicles were eliminated faster than the exercise could even accommodate. Not even the exercise itself, of them replenishing them as for the exercise, just for the exercise's own sake it couldn't accommodate it. They had to be respawned repeatedly just to keep it going. But this isn't actually an isolated event. In May last year, Ukrainian drone operators easily defeated British, Estonian, and other NATO forces in an exercise in the Baltic region, part of that forward deterrent or Eastern Sentinel idea that Mark Rutte, their Secretary General, has been pushing in the past year. And even this spring earlier on, Swedish forces led an exercise in which Ukrainian drone teams outperformed them as well. The point of this is that drone mastery is essential to modern war, and Right now, that does not seem to be the case, especially for the United States military. And don't take my word for it, take it from the military staff that have been there and the analysts that look into it as well. Now, the US Army isn't ignorant of this. I don't want to make it clear that the US Army is sort of somehow incompetent, but certainly it's not performing as effectively as it should, be that in this exercise or, of course, with the war in Iran. An infantry officer helping train Ukrainian troops in 2023 realized that America needed to learn from them, not the other way around, and has designed training programs that other units followed. Defense Secretary Hegseth, for what it's worth, has increased the number of US personnel being sent to Ukraine to study drone warfare, perhaps one of the few savvy decisions he's made. But America is currently testing Ukrainian drones to buy, and of course they signed recently that significant deal to work with the Ukrainians on drone development, production and technology. And then there are counter-drone systems America is using to defend its forces in Iran that were tested in Ukraine. So stop at this last point. America is using drone-tested counter-drone systems to defend its own soldiers in a war of choice by Trump against Iran. The most powerful military in the world is operationally dependent on the knowledge developed by a country it spent 3 years debating whether to arm in the first place and has since completely ceased in doing so. Now, to understand this more, why did the US Army lose? Now, the combined resolve result isn't about equipment. The American troops have the standard electronic warfare and counter-drone systems. The problem is doctrine, culture, experience, and Hegseth. Ukrainian drone operators have spent 4.5 years continuously repairing, adapting, and deploying drones under fire. The technology they use is constantly evolving. Frequency hopping, encryption, fiber optic cables, greater autonomy, SIM card navigation, a bit more on that in a moment, all of instead of radio control. They develop countermeasures to Russian defenses, but Russia develops countermeasures to their countermeasures, and this cycle accelerates. The knowledge embedded in Ukrainian drone units is not something you can acquire from a manual or procurement contract, essentially. It comes from thousands of hours of that combat reiteration. Necessity is the mother of all invention, basically. Now, American drone operators lack exactly that. They lack the experience fixing and arming drones under fire. They lack the tactical instinct that comes from operating in an environment where the enemy is also constantly adapting and savvy at this. And they operate large, expensive systems designed to do everything. The Patriot missile is an extraordinarily capable but costs $4 million per interceptor and takes years to produce. We are all aware, if you watch my live streams on Iran, you should do so if you don't already, the munitions shortages that Trump is driving Trump crazy, that he's forcing people to clamp down on it through just angry tweets. Now, Ukraine has been building cheaper, faster, more specific systems designed to do one job effectively and be produced at scale. These are not necessarily complicated machines. They are made up of components that you can buy in any hardware store, any supermarket, off-the-shelf components. So this exercise revealed something about armored warfare specifically. Much like the Ukrainians have been dealing incredible damage to complex military assets of the Russians, like heavy bombers, they're also demonstrating that the Ukrainians' front line has almost no armor left, in that not because armor was abandoned, but because any vehicle that moves generates a signature that reconnaissance drones can detect within minutes. The American troops that drove their own heavy armored vehicles that threw up the dust were spotted immediately and made it incredibly easy for Ukraine to respond. In Ukraine, that vehicle would be dead within 30 minutes of arriving at the front. And the US Army is essentially, therefore, training for a battlefield that no longer exists. However, it gets more interesting and something that many of you wanted me to cover, and I was waiting to bring it in with this element. In that elsewhere in Germany, in the past couple of weeks, there was a near catastrophe. A drone carrying about 800 grams of plastic explosives, or Semtex, was flown into the wing of a fully fueled Ukrainian Antonov AN-124, one of the largest transport aircraft in the world, used by Ukraine and NATO to carry military loads. Moreover, there was a second AN-124 parked right next to it, and had this explosive detonated, both aircraft would have been eviscerated up in a massive fireball. That drone had been caught on camera in the perimeter of the airport, but nobody noticed until the following day when a bus driver working for Leipzig airport spotted it, held it down and raised the alarm. This is a bus driver holding down a military-grade armed drone with his foot at a major logistics hub not too far away from elsewhere in Germany. Now, the drone used those aforementioned SIM cards and, more interestingly, 5G antenna rather than radio control, all specifically to avoid the sensor airports used to detect radio frequency signals. Its construction reflected that design rudimentary of Russian reverse engineering the early phases of the Iranian Shahed drones, and DNA traces on the captured device reportedly linked to a failed attack in 2024 that was to do with Russia's GRU military intelligence. Germany has not formally attributed this attack to Russia yet, but it's pretty clear the linkages here. And 2 days after Leipzig, two large Chinese-made drones overflew a Patriot missile facility in Germany. A Boeing 757 collided with an identified object at 400 meters of altitude. Drones have been seen flying over key military bases in Western Germany. So this is not, as some people get frustrated with, an idea of hybrid warfare to some people. This is just warfare. Many people increasingly feel, including the recent warnings from those in the Baltics or Nordic states, of an impending potential military operation by Moscow against Europe in the next few years. Russia is applying the drone technology it developed and refined fighting Ukraine directly against NATO infrastructure. And so, those who claim that NATO has been directly at war with Russia, well, we can certainly say now that Russia is directly combating NATO, and NATO is not ready for it. Leipzig airport got lucky. The bomb fell off the drone instead of detonating, and European airports had that warning. But the question is, does that mean action is going to follow? Of course, things take time, but the importance here is we have to remain vigilant. The longer we leave it to take from words to action, it gives more opportunity for something like this to actually lead to a proper catastrophe. Indeed, this is the argument I want to make directly, because I think it is the most important analytical point emerging from all of this, and it is entirely absent largely from any mainstream coverage I've seen. NATO spent 3 years debating whether Ukraine deserved support, whether to give it artillery in the first days, whether to give it tanks, then whether to give it long-range missiles, and then whether to give it Patriot batteries. Whether a country fighting for its survival deserved the weapons that might help it survive. The alliance that was built on the principle of collective defense and deterrence spent years hedging, conditioning, and delaying support to the country that needed it most. And whilst that debate was happening, Ukraine was quietly becoming the most valuable military asset on Earth in the domain that now matters most and will define warfare for years, decades to come. Ukraine's drone operators are defeating American brigades in training exercises, and those counter-drone expertise are being used by soldiers in Iran against Iran, Ukrainian technology for Gulf states. The amount of countries leveraging Ukrainian expertise in drone usage and innovative forms of warfare is insane, to the point that even Poland is withholding fighter jet parts because it wants Ukrainian drone technology in return. So the relationship is so inverted, it's almost completely impossible to overstate. It's no longer a recipient of NATO support, mind you, either. Ukraine is a contributor to NATO's survival, and the alliance that took the 3 years is now beginning to understand that they don't have much to teach as much as they have to learn from Ukraine's capacity to teach. The Ankara summary, the decision for deep precision strike coalitions is all about building and incorporating lessons on the most modernistic forms, and that therefore means Ukraine's battlefield experiences. European defense autonomy discussions, which are all about increasing expenditure and refining the ecosystem independent of any major third party, be that the US, China, or anyone, is not still making the correct decisions over Ukraine. And so what should Europe do in all of this? The Leipzig attempted attack and the combined resolve exercise make the same argument, but in two different directions. The threat is real and it is here. The knowledge to counter it also exists, and the country that has the knowledge most is Ukraine. Already, 8 German airports are due to get enhanced drone detection capabilities. You're going to see more multi-layered systems combining things like radar, mobile network anomaly detection, thermal, and acoustic sensors. But they are still getting them slowly. And unfortunately, it seems the divisions that exist within the European Union over, say, border security do transcend into these areas as well. There is urgency, and that's the right instinct, because the longer that we take to respond or emphasize to Russia that they can't get away with these sorts of attacks without experiencing some kind of blowback, as we've seen the Turkish response in the past 10 years is the best example of this, because Russia doesn't actually follow through on its threats. It still, though, emboldens Putin to press even more and see where he can get his biggest comparative advantage, which is disunity and the ability to distract. So the answer to the combined result is not just more training exercises, for example. It is a fundamental rethink of what Western security architecture actually is, and specifically Ukraine's role in that. Ukraine is not a country that needs NATO's protection necessarily. It needs its funding and advisory in specific areas, but not on the innovation and military hardware aspect. The question over Ukrainian membership is underpinning all of this, and it remains diplomatically contested in some ways because of the operational integration, the interoperability that is possible. But certainly, the more that Ukraine demonstrates that it's at the cutting edge of military technology, that's going to be something that NATO needs to weave in eventually, and Ukraine is therefore a default player there. All in all, this demonstrates that Europe sits at a precipice. You heard me saying this 8 months ago, and I reiterate it here. Europe is making the right decisions. NATO is making the right decisions if you exclude that of Donald Trump's administration. And there are these two images, several months apart, but with the same messaging. The drone revolution Ukraine pioneered is now the defining military challenge of this era. The militaries that have learned its lessons are prepared for what comes next. The ones that haven't are dangerously exposed, and Putin is emphasizing that. Even if he has his issues at home, he still has that capacity to press on the right pressure point to such an extent that it's a problem. The alliance is beginning to acknowledge this, but slowly, partially and frustratingly, and the specific reluctance of institutions that don't like admitting that they got perhaps the relationship with Ukraine or other entities backwards. The change after training with Ukraine was remarkable for many American onlookers. It's only taking this long to reach this point, and one hopes that by the end of the year we'll be in a far more favorable position. Certainly, the more things change, the more they stay the same. But everyone, let me know what you guys think. If you enjoyed the video, of course, drop it a like and subscribe if you want more simplistic breakdowns of complex issues and top-tier conversations with experts from across the spectrum as well as disciplines. We'll see you all in the next one.